everybody got that test on your partner run? Now we're going to go through the explanation of the test, and then we're going to go back and do the reading and the trainer's manual of things, what it means. The first thing you're going to look at, ladies and gentlemen, on your test, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll find a thing that says PR. And that's not blood pressure. Right here, you're going to find something that says PR, which is pulse rate. Okay? Normal on a pulse rate is 65 to 80. If your pulse rate is under 65, then it's too slow. If it is above 80, it's too fast. But this is a DPA interpretive guide, and on the pulse rate, when it says, and this just gives you a little bit of an idea of what things, if it's too low, what it can be. If it's too low, it can be a well-conditioned athlete. If you exercise every day, your pulse rate can be below 65, and that happens a lot. Another thing is it can be hypothyroidism, malnutrition, heart conditions, medications, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers. If the blood pressure, the pulse rate is too fast, pregnancy, anxiety, fever, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, anemia, blood loss, hypothyroidism, hypoglycemic panic disorder, all these things can cause this. So is the pulse rate vital to testing? It sure can be. The next thing you're going to see on this is a chart right here. It will say pulse height. See that? Okay, pulse height, what this is doing is actually measuring your hydration in your blood. So right up underneath, your normal on this should be 2 to 8. Now that's what they said when the machine came out, that it should be 2 to 8. Over the years, through testing with this machine, we have found that once they get above a 6, they are beginning to have some issues. Okay, what would those issues be? That number right underneath, where it says pH, right underneath your blood pressure, the pulse rate, that is not your pH level. That's pulse height. If it's below 2, normally they're dehydrated. Okay? Dehydration can cause a lot of problems. So if it's that way, the first thing I asked them, are you drinking any water at all? Okay? Now then, if it gets above 6, what would cause the pulse hydration or the water levels or the liquid levels in your blood to run high? Water retention. They could be in the first stages of congestive heart failure. You don't tell them that, okay? But these are things you need to know, okay? And another thing, too, if you test somebody that's just come out of the gym within the last 30 minutes, they will show real high. Okay, so you got to know the difference. So 30 minutes. Okay, your next thing you go to, if you look down on the bottom again, you will see where it says ejection time. Now this can be directly related to ejection fraction. You know, it's not going to tell you what their ejection fraction is, but it can give you an idea of what's going on. The ejection time, what it does, it measures the speed of the aortic valve as it opens and closes. Okay? Normal time is 260 to 380 milliseconds. You figure that up, you're looking at between a quarter and a half a second. So it's moving, okay? Now then, when it prints out, right up on the right side, where it says ETC, it will have their ejection time. If it's not right, if it's not normal, normally it'll print on the bottom, it'll print out normal. But if it's not normal, if it's opening and closing too fast, it will say short, okay? The things that can cause that, okay? You find your ejection time. If the ejection time is too short, hypertension, hypothyroid, and anxiety. Okay? If that comes out and prints out long, that means that the aortic valve is opening and closing too slow. What can cause that? Listen, folks, don't diagnose yourself. Just use what the machine says. Just tell them what the machine says and let it go, okay? If the ejection time is too long, aortic stenosis. Anybody know what that is? That's where the aortic valve is beginning to harden. Okay, that's where the aortic valve is beginning to calcify. Maybe it's got plaque or whatever on it, but it's beginning to harden. Aortic stenosis or decrease in cardio output. In other words, their ejection fraction, they're not putting out enough blood. If they're not putting out enough blood through the aortic valve, more than likely they're retaining part of that blood in the left ventricle. And then it becomes congestive heart failure. Okay. Now these things I'm telling you, you take and put in the back of your mind, but don't go out and diagnose anybody, okay? Now, the next thing you do, it will say recognition. This is how many pulse rates or how many times or how many of the pulses that the machine recognized of how many actual pulses it beat. On yours, I don't know what you got, but it will say recognition, 75 pulses of 75 recognized. If that first number is less than that second number, that's telling me it did not recognize all the pulses. In other words, all of them were not intense or strong enough to be recognized. Now, what if it recognizes below 50%? What do? You rerun the test because you may have done something wrong. Tell your client, I want to rerun this to make sure. They're not going to care if you'll just be up front with them. I've had to do this. But if you'll watch your machine, the operators, listen to me. Watch your machine as it's running. Because during that minute, if they have an episode, let's say, for instance, somebody comes into you that's got atrial fibrillation. Everybody knows what that is. That's, the heart's out of rhythm and tops and bottoms trying to outrun each other and not beating together. And in that 1 minute, sometimes that episode will take place. And while it's doing that, this machine is not going to recognize those pulses. Now, so you watch your machine, and then when it comes out, if it's below 50%, then you tell them, and how do you get 50%? Just take your first number, divide it with the second one. If it's less than 50%, then tell them, I want to run another one to make sure this is not me doing this. If it turns out the same thing, then more than likely they're going to then tell you because they already know it. Okay, I found this to be universal all over the United States. If once you pick it up with this machine, then they will come clean with you. Okay, they'll tell you, I know I got atrial fibrillation. You can't tell them. You got to let them tell you. But once you've rerun it, you tell them you're running at 50% recognition. There is a possibility of a problem. You don't tell them there is. Okay. Now then. What if you got somebody that the recognition is, their pulses is, and I've had this to happen, and the reason I'm teaching you this, they didn't tell us this, just up front. Let's say a lady comes in, she sits down at your table, and she's got her pulse rate is 120. What are we going to do? First thing I asked them now is, are you pregnant? Rather than trying to scare them, I say, are you pregnant? Because this machine will. Now, y'all going to get a flash drive with all this stuff on it. Go back and read and study a lot of this. If a lady's pregnant beyond a certain trimester, the machine will actually start picking up both heartbeats and putting them together. Okay. We go from there to up at the top, which is called PTG. Now, this word you need to learn how to pronounce. Took me 3 years. Plethysmogram waveform. Now then, that's a big long medical word with just a real simple answer. Plethysmogram simply means this: the machine is checking to see if there's any elasticity left in your arteries. Okay? Elasticity to me, okay folks, listen to me. To me, this is the most important part of the test. Simply because of this. Every time your heart beats. How many in the room has ever heard of hardening the arteries? Okay. Okay. Every time your heart beats, your arteries, by nature, this is the way God created us, so it's right. Every time your heart beats, your artery is supposed to flex open. That's called the elasticity of your arteries. Heart beats, arteries open, heart closes, shoots the blood downstream, the arteries snap back in place, push your blood on. As it does that, you will find a word in your literature you're going to get called a back tidal wave. What that is that blood goes down, it creates a back tidal wave, another electrical wave going back to the heart. Once it hits the heart or the aortic valve and the left ventricle, it will create in your heartbeat a dicrotic notch. Okay. Now, what that simply means, if you on you that run the test, if there's a good notch there, you can smile. If there's not, then we could have some issues. Okay? When this thing does not create a dicrotic notch in your heartbeat, that's simply telling me one of four things is going on. Either the arteries are beginning to stiffen, which is called arteriosclerosis, or there's plaquing, which is called atherosclerosis, calcification, okay? Any of you ever heard of people's arteries calcifying? Do you know that the arteries can literally break, like you taking a pencil and popping them? If they get calcified enough, they can just shatter, and they're dead. That's the bottom line. The fourth thing is the walls of their artery are called the muscularis, which is this, will get thick. And when it gets thick, guess what? It don't swell to the outside. It gets thick to the inside, therefore cutting off blood flow. Okay, the next thing I go to, and this is the way I explain a test. Y'all can do it any way y'all want to. Whatever y'all feel comfortable with, just make sure you cover every facet of it. Where it says circulation analysis, EEI, ejection elastic index. Normal should be, I think, between 4 and 8, 0.4 and 0.8. Outside of whoever you run that test on, there will be some parentheses, and that's what their actual number will be. If it's below 4, circulation is low. If it's above 8, that's high, and sometimes there can be some issues that cause that. Okay. Everybody see the EEI? Has everybody got that? On the bottom, where shaded, those shaded areas. Right out beside that, it will have some numbers. 0.4 to 0.8 is normal, and if it's below 0.4, it's low.
And what was the
Ejection elastic index. That's the circulation of your large arteries.
large?
Yeah. The next one is called your DDI, dicrotic index. Now, this is something that amazed me. Those arteries, which being your small arteries, do not plaque. Okay, so if they're low, it's something you're doing. Okay? If it's low, that's something you're doing. Smoking, eating too many sweets, drinking too many soda pops, too much chocolate, too much junk food. McDonald's will do it in a minute. Now, let me give y'all a little statistic that's really going to stagger you. If you go to McDonald's and eat their French fries, they deplete your body of nitric oxide for 8 hours. They will absorb all your nitric oxide that your endotheliums produce for like 8 hours. Yeah, that's the oils that's in them. Okay, now do you see everywhere in the world there's a golden arch, the cardiovascular disease? This is a real statistic now, folks. Everywhere there's a golden arch, cardiovascular disease has escalated. The last one is the DCI, which represents your capillaries or your peripherals. If you're low in the peripherals, usually that will correlate back to the pulse height. Okay? Because if your pulse height is low, then you will be low in your small arteries. Now then, if anybody in the house, and I've not seen any of you's test, okay? But if anybody in the house, if the capillaries or peripherals are high, then that can point towards some issues with you, okay? With nobody, that's just not a normal thing for the peripherals to be high. Most time it can be depression, anxiety, things like that will cause that to shoot up into the high range. Dehydration, diabetes, neuropathy. There's a lot of things that can cause it to be. And come over here on the bottom side now, number 5, you will see APG patterning agent. There will be a grade. Everybody see a grade on the one you tested? Anybody get an A? See no hands go up. All right, if you got an A, you really don't need us right now. Okay? Because you're where you ought to be. If you're a B, this is going to put a grade on you, okay? Now, some of you wasn't B's when we first started, was you? Okay. Okay. Do you remember what you was when you first started, Charlie? Okay. Okay. All right. Anyway, you got a grade, and this that they give you here. Everybody get one of these. If you will look, whatever your grade was, if you'll come out here and find your grade, and then come down and find the number which is your type, then that will tell you your vascular age of whoever it was you tested.